Well, so far we've created UV maps by telling Blender where we want to break the object apart, actually assigning seams ourselves so that we know exactly how the model is going to be broken up and laid out in our UV map. Now, for more complex objects or objects that we don't really need that much control over, we can let Blender make the decisions about where to create the seams and how to break up the object. So I'm thinking something like this particular object, the antenna supports. I'm thinking that these are a little bit too complex and a little bit too small in the scene for us to spend time going through and marking seams on this. This could take a while, and it's just not that big of an object in the scene. I think we would do better by just allowing Blender to make the decisions about how to break this apart. So let's take a look at how that would work. With this selected, I'm going to hit the division key on the numpad, and then I'll take away the mirror modifier and zoom in with the period key. And so if we tab into edit mode, this is what we have here. It's, of course, a mess. You can see the original cross pattern here of the UV map that came with that original cube when we began this object. And then all these other pieces and cuts added into this, and it's just kind of a mess. And that's why we need to go through and UV map these. But as I said, this may be a little bit too much for us to spend the time and the effort on. So what we can do is, with everything selected here in edit mode, we can hit the U key and go to Smart UV Project. And this will just allow Blender to give it a try on its own without any input from us as to where the seam should go. Before I do that, though, let me go back to object mode and go ahead and press Control A and apply the scale. Let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. And then back into edit mode, let's press U and we'll click Smart UV Project. And we have this settings panel that we can adjust angle, limit, and things like that. But ultimately, I think all we really need to do is just hit OK here. So let's do that. And this is what we get. So as you can see, Blender went through and just did it on its own. It said, I think the seam should go here or there, and it broke it out on its own. It's still having some problems here with these n-gons, as you can see. And we can go through and clean that up, of course. We can just, with this whole thing selected, we could just press Control T and triangulate the whole thing, and that'll clean that all up. So Control T, and there we go. So that's it. That's our whole object. And you may think, well, why don't we do that all the time? That was easy. Well, Blender or the computer doesn't always make the best decisions as to where seams should go. And sometimes it will put a seam right in the middle of, say, a character's face, or for our particular project, right on top of the hood. And it makes it very visible, and it can be an ugly break in the texture. So when we can and where it's needed, we really need to control where the seams are going to go. But for this is fine. I think this is a small part of the project, and I don't think it'll be a problem. Let's go ahead and hit the division key to bring everything back. And here's where I think we should also talk about what I'm doing with the mirroring here. As you know, as I'm creating the UV maps for each of these objects here, say the windows, I'm removing the mirror modifier so there isn't a duplicate on the other side. And there's a reason for that. And I think maybe it would be good for us to talk about, say, these windows here in relation to what we're doing with the other windows here. So the reason why I'm doing this is to try and make our texture space, or make our UV maps, a little more efficient, to use up more of this 0 to 1 space here in the UV map. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's go ahead and UV map these front windows, and maybe I can illustrate it as we go. So let's go ahead and hit the division key here. And for this object, I have a mirror modifier on it. So let's go ahead and take that off, and let's do the UV map for this. And it shouldn't be that hard because we've done the other windows. We know that we want probably a seam right here. We probably want to break these edges out like we did before, right? We can select all of these. Oh, let me get this one, and we can mark seams there. In addition, we can go ahead and mark seams along these corners as well. We did that for the others. And we chose this edge right in here to break the window out from the rest of the frame. So let's press Alt-click and select that edge all the way around the window and mark a seam. There it is in there. And also we want to go ahead and get those corners on the window part too, because that helps that break those corners apart and lay the rest of it out flat. So let's go ahead and do that. And this one, and this one here. Okay, so we have those seams in place. Now let's go ahead and select everything. Oh, we should probably tab back into object mode, press Control A and apply the scale. Then let's tab back into edit mode, select everything, press the U key, and this time let's go ahead and choose unwrap since we've gone to the trouble of applying our seams here. So we'll click unwrap, and there we go. That looks good. We could switch from angle-based to conformal to see if we like it any better here. I think I like conformal a little better. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's talk about this mirror modifier. So if I applied the mirror modifier back to this, let's go ahead and bring everything back with the division key. If I applied the mirror modifier back to this, let me show you what happens. Let's go ahead and click Add Modifier and Mirror. So let's come over here and I'll click Apply. Let me tab back into Object Mode. I'll click Apply. And then if we tab back into Edit Mode, you can see nothing has changed. However, here in UV Island Select Mode, I'll click here, hit the G key and move and take a look. The other window has been placed right below the existing UV islands. So in other words, when I put a texture on here, when I take this into Substance Painter and we apply a texture to this area, it will also be put on the other one as well. Now what that means here is that if I create a texture that has a big splotch of mud or dirt or something here on the window here, it'll be in the exact place over on this side as well. So there will be visible duplicates, because when the piece of dirt is on here, it's also on the one below. So what I'm counting on is to be able to use these windows here in that way. So I will mirror these over ultimately, have the UV islands one on top of the other so they take up less room in the UV map here, and you'll never see both sides at the same time. You'll only ever see this side, or you'll only ever see this side. So if there's a piece of dirt or something here, you'll never be able to compare it side by side to the other windows, as you can here. So when I can optimize the UV map by stacking UV islands one on top of the other, like for one side or the other, I'm going to do it because it will increase the amount of texture space that I can use here by cutting in half the number of UV islands that I have. However, for something like this, I need to go ahead and apply it and then go to the UV menu here, right here, or let me hit A and select everything. Go to the UV menu and choose Pack Islands. It'll pack them all individually, not on top of each other. So the textures will be unique for each one. Whereas for these, I'm going to wait till the very end to apply the mirror modifiers. So what will happen is, here, let me combine these here. I'm going to press Control J, and I'll combine all of these. So what'll happen is, I will average island scale, I will pack islands for the whole thing, right, for the whole vehicle, and only then will I come back, grab these, split them out, and then mirror these over individually, right? I can then mirror, there they are, apply. Now if we come back and we join all these together again, Control J, and go back into edit mode. So now if I select this and say this, you can see they're one on top of each other. So I can select this one, hit G, and move it out, and you can see it's one on top of the other. So I'm using less texture space in my UV map by having the mirrored objects one on top of the other. Well, I hope that makes at least a little bit of sense as we move forward here. You're going to see how it works as we go, because we're going to have a lot to do with mirroring objects over. But my point was, we've got to kind of make a decision sometimes. Like this here, we've got to make a decision. We're going to go ahead and mirror it over and apply the mirror before we pack islands, since we can see them both at the same time. And over here, these, we're going to mirror these over after we pack islands so that they remain one on top of the other. All right, well, that has been a long-winded explanation here. My apologies. I hope it makes a little more sense as we move forward here. So I'm going to grab these over here and split these out and get rid of these for now. I'm just going to press X, delete faces, and there we go. So now we've got these windows together. There we are. And we've got these windows here that we will mirror over after we pack islands on the entire vehicle. All right, so in the next video, let's continue working on UV mapping, say, these objects and this, maybe these and this. So that's coming up next.